Hey everyone, welcome back again. This is Neil with Real Terrain Hobbies. Today we're going to be continuing our video series of this house, the tutorial series, and we're actually going to be continuing on from where we left off on the video titled Vlog Number 1. And that was actually just meant to be sort of a weekly vlog of the work that I'd done, but it was actually part of the tutorial series. We just finished level 1, but this video was prior to that. So if you want to go and check that out, it is there right above in the link, just above there. So in that one, we had started level 2 and done some work with that. And now we're going to be continuing on from that, starting level 3. And then from there, 4, which is actually the whole rafter system, which is very exciting. And I'm really eager to get into that. So stick along for the ride. I'm excited to get into it and to get you guys creating some pretty awesome stuff. So hopefully some of you out there are going to be using some of these techniques and ideas and maybe just have some inspiration from this. So it is super awesome. And yeah, let's get on with it. First, just a quick note, my apologies for my absence over the past few weeks here. I've been having to work out of town quite a bit. Life has been very busy, very hectic. I'm trying to slow things down a bit, kind of unusually so, and also things at home as well. So trying to find time for this. I usually do it over the weekends or late at night, but my last couple weekends have been completely taken up. So very sorry for that, but good news is I've got this video done and I also have next week's video completed. So you'll have 2 videos in a row, and that leaves me lots of time to work away on completing this build. So thanks for your patience, guys, and enough of that. Let's get on with the video. Okay, so to start things off, we're going to start with the base for level 3. And if you want some exact measurements for that, the main rectangle is 9 inches by 5.5 inches. And then the room that's going to be sticking out off the side over top of the staircase is 2 inches by 4 inches. So yeah, I just went ahead, started off with that, and now I'm going to be moving on to the walls and getting all those made, and then we can go ahead and glue them all together. So this is the end piece measurement for both the front and back end of the building, and you can pause here if you want to take that down. But from there, I'm just placing that on top of a piece of foam board, tracing out the rest of the peak along the same angle that the sides were on. And then as well, this is actually going to have another tier right at the peak, and I'm marking that at 2 1/4 is what I decided. And then you mark out the center, and then from those 2 marks, just draw a line across and you get your second tier. And this is the peak piece front and back for the level 4 roof rafters. And if you want, just pause that if you want those exact measurements. And this is the second end for the back side of the building. I just made this all one piece and had it cut out, but it's the exact replica of the front end. And you can see where I cut it along and made it both for the 3rd and the 4th level. And so for measuring out this level and each of the walls, the lengths of everything, all I'm really doing is for this level, matching it to the 2nd when I made the base, and I wanted a bit of a cantilever off of the front. And then when I'm measuring the sides, I'm sort of just winging it, and I wanted, a certain length that looked good to my eye coming up off those supports over the porch, so there's no exact science. But if you do want these measurements, let me know in the comments. I can give them to you. But if you're making your own, just do what kind of looks good to you, and give adequate cantilevers where needed, or make them flush with the level below. It's all up to you on what your preference is. Alright, so I got all my pieces marked out and we're ready to go ahead and glue them on. And in case you've missed the other videos, I'm using PL Premium to glue all my wall and structural pieces together, and most of the wood pieces as well. And the One major benefit, as you can see here, is you just after applying it, you don't need any supports to keep things standing, keep the walls standing, and you don't need anything like that. So you can just use the glue, and it's strong enough and thick enough just to set it to where you want it, and it's not going anywhere. Okay, and that is it for the structure for our third level. All the pieces have been cut and glued, so I'll just be setting that aside. And from there, as that dries, I'm moving on to the level 2 again to add some more of the wood trim and a few other wood elements along with that. And as far as the design goes for how I chose to put on these wood panels, I just kind of... sort of randomized it with what I wanted. I don't want too much of the same as far as putting in the different angles. I did the angled pieces in a few spots to kind of add that character, but then other places I just, you can see I went straight across and put sort of a T in place, just to sort of break things up a bit and make things a little less uniform. And if you need some inspiration and ideas on how to do that, there's plenty of references for half timber houses. Just go online and look that up, and you can kind of pick and choose different elements for these trim pieces. But for the windows, I wanted support on either side, a panel on either side, I guess, of the window, just to make it look like it was being supported structurally. This way, it's kind of how windows are done or framed out nowadays and traditionally. So I just that was kind of the one thing I wanted done around the windows anyway. And these little windowsill pieces are put in. It's important to have those in. These are going to be damming the plaster in once we get to that stage. But on the back end here, I again broke it up a little bit and added in some curved pieces, and it was kind of important to do that. Otherwise, get a look where things are too straight and too, just too clean looking, and it starts to lose kind of a bit of character. So adding these and just breaks up all those straight lines and really kind of finishes off the building a little, or adds a little bit more to it anyway. And so that's why I kind of decided to go with those. Yeah, so it is kind of arbitrary how I chose to put these kind of design panels in. Sometimes I just went with some slants. Sometimes I did the X, as you can see back here. And then I also put the nail marks in too for those other boards. And just to do that, you simply poke in the tip of the knife and then I twist it around. And then when I apply the stain on top of that and then wipe it off afterwards, there's more stain left inside those holes, and it's actually quite a bit darker and looks pretty good. So yep, here I went with the upside down V. Again, no real science why I choose to do certain things. I just kind of want to randomize things a bit. I don't want it all to be too uniform, so here I went with the upside down V and another slant piece. And actually these ones are 3/8 as opposed to 1/4 inch balsa pieces, so I did go with some thinner ones as well to give a little bit of change and character and break things up a bit. Okay, so it is the following day. I've waited long enough for my third level to for the glue to finish drying. So now it's time to start on with more trim on that. So here I'm using, for this base, for the trim around the bottom, is 3/8 balsa. I wanted to do that because the top trim on the second level is 1/4 inch, so I didn't want 1/4 inch stacked on top of 1/4 inch. So I went with a 3/8 around the base of this, just to, again, break things up and not make it look overly uniform with having a 1/4 inch on top of 1/4 inch and maybe looking a little odd. And so now I'm putting the trim on the top of the walls, but I'm also cutting these in half, the thickness down, because there's going to be 1/16 balsa on either side for the wood panels. I didn't want it super thick, and so to trim that down, I'm cutting these in half very carefully. Again, just do it very lightly. Don't get your fingers in the way, because this if you fight with it and you're using too much pressure on these, you could easily cut a finger, and that would not be good. And again, with the base, I'm just using the full 1/16 balsa panel. I'm not quite sure with this if this is what I want to stick with in the end. I might actually, somebody had mentioned to me of getting a little V chisel, and then I can actually carve in the wood panels, each of the little boards. I could just carve those in using this V chisel. So I might figure or consider doing that. Also, I'd mentioned in the previous update that I did that I might even consider just cutting this bottom level completely out, or just the floor right out, and do actual rafters across with floorboards. But at this point, I'm kind of leaning towards not doing that, just for time's sake, and to kind of move on to the next project. So now I'm painting all this foam core black. I'm going to be using wood panels on this, so again, I don't want the spaces in between to show any white. But actually what I should have done is just went out and bought some black foam core. You can buy black stuff as well as white, and I think for my next projects I'm just going to use black, just in case I have situations where I'm using wood paneling. So, but for now I'm just painting it all black, and yeah, that's all I'm doing there. So now we're moving on to adding the wood trim all around the peaks, and this is going to be acting as a wood beam, and yeah, so pretty straightforward here. And the method for cutting each of these out, again, is just lining them up, marking or scoring on the piece with my knife, and then just cutting it and scraping with the wire brush, and then staining. Pretty standard and straightforward. And now it's time to add the wood panels onto the base. And again, I'm just using PL Premium for this. Pretty standard, just adequately spread it around. Make sure that you're not going to have any kind of bubbles or anything like that where it could potentially come off. But yep, nothing to it. Just go ahead, glue it on, and yeah. And now I'm moving on to the supports for the window above. These are going to be supporting the window that is going to be sticking out. And these are actually called jetties. And the top piece is the actual jetty. And then underneath is the jetty bracket. And I did some research on that to find that out for half timber houses. And so that there is our technical term for this. So that can be anything for supporting a window, or even the upper level that sticks out and kind of cantilevers out is called a jetty. So there we go. And so I'm making these, and I went with 4 for this window, and it's a pretty simple process for cutting them out. I cut them out to length, and then now I'm just shaping this curved piece here with my knife, and pretty straightforward, nothing too complicated there, but boy, it sure adds a lot of character. This really makes the whole front end, I think, are these pieces here that really makes it all pop. And yeah, I'm just super happy with it. Really, really awesome. Now it's time to cut out the opening for our window. It's going to be 2 inches wide by about 1 inch tall. And I'm just using this piece here to line up for where I want the window to end. It's just going to be lined up where the slope meets the vertical there. And so that's all that piece is there for. And again, it's just 2 inches by 1 inch. And then I'm going to make that into 2 windows, but that will be framed out with some of our square dowel pieces. And at this point I decided it was time we went ahead to start on some of our wood paneling. So I'm cutting those out and getting them ready to stain and cut to shape and size and glued on. And the stain, like the other stain, is Varathane. It's an oil-based stain. I decided at the beginning to go with oil-based as I was thinking it was good for longevity, but what I'm using here is called Weathered Gray. And I now have latex gloves, which I highly recommend. This stuff, when it gets on your hands, it absorbs into your bloodstream. Your hands absorb a lot, so this stuff, if it gets absorbed into your bloodstream, it does cause, I think it's kidney damage in the long run. I know like farmers who handle a lot of chemicals have died from cancer and kidneys and whatnot. So it's really important. Use some latex gloves and be safe with this stuff, and don't. It's all long-term things down the road that you're going to be paying. So just be safe with that. So at this stage of the game, I'm just putting on these panels, nothing to it. Cut them to shape and to size, randomize their thickness a little bit. You can even make the curve or the cuts a little curvy. It just adds more character to the whole build. And then after that, I'm adding on the trim. I put this trim over top of those panels, and same with any of the other trim pieces for this. It just kind of adds to the whole character. Now, if I didn't put this on top, I'd have to basically be cutting into those wood panels to inlay them into the building, and that would have been a lot of more work, having to cut each of those panels out, or all the wood panels out, just to have them inlaid in there. So here we have our jetties and jetty brackets stained and glued together, and these are just going to go directly underneath the window. And like I said before, they add a lot of character, so I highly recommend adding these in. And you can see here, and I actually forgot that I wanted this window a little wider, or taller, I guess you could say. And so I put them on, and I'm just marking this out and then cutting it a little deeper there. So it's actually more about 1 inch and 3/16, the size of the 3/16 trim that you see on either side. So now, once we have the jetties and jetty brackets all glued on, it's time to frame this window out. And pretty simple. Line up your pieces, mark them with your knife, and cut them. So I actually didn't end up going out too far with this. It only comes out about 1/4 of an inch, but I figured that was enough to go for the look that I was after. And there we have our window. And I gotta say, it looks pretty darn good. And I like the look of the jetties so much for the window, I decided I was going to go ahead and do that for the bottom level on level 2 to support the top. And I'm also going to add in, as you can see there, another jetty bracket on the other side of the window. So on the bottom there is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to say 6. Yes, so there's 6. And again, I just cut out, I figured the 4 wasn't going to be enough, so I put the extra in there and glued them in. And again, these things add a lot of character. I'm quite pleased with them. And here I am, late at night. Kids are asleep. Wife is in bed, asleep as well. And we are just burning the midnight oil. So I lost a little bit of footage for the overhang for the roof above the window, but all I did there is use some 3/16 balsa sheets, and I cut each of those pieces out for the kind of the skeletal support for the roof. 3 pieces there, curved pieces, and then a flat rectangle on the bottom. Nothing to that really. And now I'm just gluing on some boards across. You can have some spaces in there. It's going to be covered up in shingles anyway. So nothing, no really big trick to it, but I made that curve to the roof, and the curve itself actually adds quite a bit more character as well. So that's all I was doing there. And here's the final effect, and now it's time to throw some shingles on. And all I'm doing for the shingles is cutting them out of the 3/16 balsa sheet. And these guys are pretty small. They're maybe a 1/4 inch big, 1/4 inch by I'd say 1/4 inch long by 3/16 or 1/8 wide. And again, just vary the different shapes. And I'm also just adding various different trim pieces as I go along. So you can see I've got all the shingles glued on. It's now time to paint them, and I'm actually going to paint them this time instead of staining them using acrylic paint. I decided to try out some light brown at the beginning, as you can see here. And in the end, it didn't have the desired effect that I wanted. But after I added the light brown, I added on some white dry brushing in. And then after that, a black wash. Here you can see how things look with the white dry brush. Adds quite a lot of depth to everything. But now I'm going and adding in the black wash, and this adds a lot of character. And you can just see the technique that I did there. The technique I do is add a thick wash, or a thick with lots of pigment in on one area, and then I thin it out with some water on the brush afterwards to sort of feather it off from dark to light. And now I'm adding in some yellow olive for some moss effect. And I'm just dabbing that in. I had it watered down a little bit, but not too much. I kind of wanted quite a bit of the pigment left in there. But overall, this effect looked really good. It was it ended up being with the whitewash and the the white dry brushing and the black wash in afterwards. It really looked like a really nice old gray weathered bit of wood, but actually I found that it looked too old looking, and so I went and added in some burnt umber afterwards to give it a nice new and fresh look to it, and really kind of make the model look a little bit nicer than the old weathered kind of old barn kind of looked. It was kind of what it gave it before. So I added in the nicer browns into there to make it look a lot newer and just a little more visually appealing. And now it's time to add in some of the cross beams going across, and I also am adding in some columns, some supports for that beam. And you kind of want to plan out first where you're going to be putting your windows. I didn't really do that because I'm going to have some windows coming out the sides of the angled roof pieces, so just make sure that they're not going to be in the way of those. And finally, I cut some really thin. I'd want to say these are 16th by 16th piece of balsa wood, and I actually wet them, or actually soaked them rather. I just had a cup of water and I set them into there, and I put a little bit of weight on top of them just so they don't float to the top, but they actually sunk in, and I left them for about an hour to 2 hours long. And that way they absorb the water and they become much more flexible. And then they can just kind of curve along the slope of the roof. And then I used an elastic band finally to wrap it around this whole piece and glue them into place. All right, everybody, that is a wrap for this part. Again, this is part 1 of part 2 of 2 videos I have covering everything from where I left off last on level 2 all the way up to the rafter system. So next week, the video is already done, already complete. It'll be covering the windows and all that fun stuff coming out of the roof. So they're kind of roof windows on level 3. And then the whole entire rafter system of level 4. So you have that to look forward to next week. And in the meantime, I'm going to be working away on this house. So it's going to be, I'm wanting to get this done and complete, and on to the next big project, whatever that might be. But I did mention that we probably are going to be doing a base as well for this, which should be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to that. And again, some water effects and all sorts of trees, grass, and rocks, and all that fun stuff. So anyway, thanks a lot, guys, for watching. Stay tuned for next week on next Wednesday. And after that, fingers crossed, the following Wednesday afterwards. Okay, guys. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.